FTS is essentially a remote piloting system that turns off the aircraft beacon and allows an individual who is sitting in a command chair to take over flight operations for the plane. Literally, they just take it away from the pilot. The pilot doesn't have control anymore, and the pilot cannot stop this from happening. The reason for doing that, obviously, is if the pilot has a heart attack or something like that, or there's a hijack. Just take the plane away from the hijackers.
September 11, 2001 was supposed to be a normal day in the United States, but the early hours of that morning has changed everything, including the fate of people living thousands of miles away from the United States. Of the 4 aircraft hijacked on September 11, the American Airlines Flight 11, 175 and 77, the United Airlines Flight 93 was the only aircraft that didn't reach the intended target. This flight involved a Boeing 757-222, was flying United Airlines' daily scheduled morning flight from Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey to San Francisco International Airport in California. The hijacking on Flight 93 began at 9:28 a.m. Eastern Time. By this time, Flights 11 and 175 had already crashed into the World Trade Center, and Flight 77 was within 9 minutes of striking the Pentagon. The hijackers stormed the aircraft's cockpit and diverted it toward the East Coast, in the direction of Washington, D.C., where the intended target was the Capitol building. During this time, several passengers and flight attendants learned from phone calls that the World Trade Center and the Pentagon attacks already happened. So they revolted against the hijackers and attempted to regain control of the aircraft. During the struggle, the plane crashed into a field near the Indian Lake. All 44 people aboard were killed.
Do you see any activity on your right side, smoke or anything like that?
Negative, we're searching.
What I did originally for them was worked in the Hewlett-Packard HPUX operating environment and the IBM PowerPC-based environment. The PowerPC-based environment ran the data infrastructure for a system called SAM, S-A-M, and it's very important we talk about SAM and what it does. The rest of the system handled all of the aircraft portfolios. This operation center is a maintenance operation center, so it actually is the place where the planes are maintained. The SAM area, Service Air Mechanic, is where this would have been operated from, because the Service Air Mechanic Operations Center has in it a pilot for each plane and a mechanic for each plane. Flight 93, for instance, the one that was supposedly taken over by a bunch of individuals, was our plane. We maintained it. Physically, we were the maintenance operations center for it, so it was our bird. And if it was going to get taken over by anything, by any FTS operations center, it would have been ours.
Some people, however, question the official narrative of the US that few Al-Qaeda members hijacked the planes and conducted these complicated operations, and they believe that the alleged hijacked planes were precision-guided by remote control. Although conspiracy theory sounding at first blush, remote control technology of airplanes has been around for decades. For example, SPC Corporation provided the Flight Termination System and Command Transmitter System, the technology that allows planes to be remote controlled should the pilots be incapacitated or the plane hijacked.
As you know, the Israeli Air Force has exercised, practiced, and developed techniques for dealing with hijacked aircraft for years and years. For instance, they carry special missiles that are not to destroy, designed not to destroy airliners, but to force them to land, missiles with inert warheads and other sophisticated gear. What have you guys done to equip our Air Guard and other NORAD potentially assigned units with the training, with the rules of engagement and the hardware that gives them an option other than what we have now, which is just to destroy the aircraft and all its passengers?
I'm aware of at least one program which is classified, so we can either talk about it offline or provide you the classified paper on it. There may be others to do exactly that.
I was fired the morning of 9/13, which was Friday the 13th. I walked into the office, my boss came over and said through a phone call that there was a problem. I needed to hang out. There was a bunch of stuff going on. I said, I assume it's based on what happened on the 11th. And he said, I can't talk to you about it. I said, okay, no problem. I figured to myself, this is over. There's something going on.
So Todd Glassey was kicked out from his job at the United Airlines, and according to him, the possible reason was of what he said to the FBI.
What I said to the FBI was that United was so bad security-wise that the operations terminal for the flight crews and whatnot was often left logged in to the Apollo operations software in places like Narita, and so anybody could just walk into the flight lounge and order an airplane.
Glassey's story is not only confined to his previous job as support manager with the United Airlines, but also in inventing a digital timestamp that is used today in many technologies, including weapon systems.
I came up with this really cool idea for how to replace money. And I looked at the way that things like what we now know as Bitcoin and things of that nature work today. I looked at those in 1996 when I was the industry liaison to the American Bar Association's Information Security Committee. So I came up with this idea of creating electronic money. And then I looked at the technology and I realized that this electronic money technology would also run weapons.
The timestamp that Glassey invented is called Location-Based Services and Digital Evidence Standards. He created the core IP inside the two standards, enabling patents which, according to him, control all of today's time and location operations.
Weapons, military uses, are the fastest way to get technology propagated into the commercial environment. You build a weapon system, you build a control practice for a military system, and it will be inside of financial operations within 2 calendar years. No ands, ifs, or buts. That's the way it happens. So you look at all of the things that people like DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, developed, the internet, networking, digital commerce processes. These are actually control mechanisms for weapon systems.
After that, Glassey says he approached the White House and offered to commoditize the US time base.
I went to various parties and I approached the White House directly and I said, I want to commoditize the US time base. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, I want to turn the US clock into a postage stamp machine. And they said, you're crazy. And I said, you need to call the master timekeeper. His name is Dr. Judah Levine. Here's his number. They did. Next thing you know, I'm talking to people in the White House, and they said, tell us how it works. And so the next thing I know, I'm designing this set of digital timestamping infrastructure specifically for monetary local things. Bluetooth advertising. You walk into a store, your phone gets a Bluetooth set of ads pumped into it. That's all my stuff. Yeah. The work was done on a patent, US 6 370629, which I hired a guy by the name of Mark Hastings from a company called Digital Delivery to file for me. Mark came back with this brilliant idea and said, we have this other patent already there. We'll just amend it with your stuff and we'll give you the rights to use your stuff. Your stuff will be separate from ours. You'll always control your stuff, but we'll get to use your stuff inside of our product. And my partner and I talked about it for a while and we said, we don't really like this. And he came back again and said, we'll pay for everything. Well, okay, fine, not a problem. Next thing you know, Mark's got the patent filed, only filed it in his name exclusively. And the Patent and Trademark Office, we went to them and said, this is a conditional assignment, not a permanent assignment. And they said, yeah, sorry, it's permanently assigned. We handed them the contract and said, no, it's not. Here's the contract, read the contract. And they said, oh, no, it's not. It's permanently assigned. And it's been sold, by the way. We said, what? They said, Mark Hastings' business has been sold to a company called Datum. I said, that's impossible. I work for Datum. They said, well, Datum owns the company. Here's there's even press about it. Datum Corporation bought my patent agent. Now, they illegally transferred the patent into their name, and then they ran off and filed it in half a dozen different countries, 7 jurisdictions, Australia, Brazil, Canada, South Africa, South Korea, Japan, and the EU. And then they abandoned all of them. And this created functionally what is now a war crime.
Glassey claims that his invention was sold to third parties. But who are these companies? And for what purposes the timestamp is being used today?
Who it's being used for today is every one of the big Silicon Valley software companies. Microsoft has 10 derivative patents. Apple itself has 46 derivative patents that are all taken from my master patent that they've never paid for, that they don't pay licensing on, that they sell illegally into all countries. And so it's literally the largest intellectual property fraud in the history of the human race. Every piece of commercial software, every single piece of commercial software on every computer in the world uses our stolen IP, all of it. Every Microsoft operating environment, the Windows NTFS, for instance, has 8 digital timestamps for each file. And this is replicated in a bunch of magic little indexes called FATs, file access tables. So you may have a multi-terabyte drive that has bunches of FATs on them. Every single FAT has a replication for every file that has 8 timestamps that are illegal. Every single one.
According to Glassey, his timestamp is not only used in the civil sector but also in the military sector. So could it be possible that his invention is being used in certain weapon systems, and what are the consequences of that?
Inside of weapon systems, most weapon systems, especially things like cruise missiles and things of that nature, run on navigation controls. So the timestamps are absolutely critical in navigation controls in measuring the distance between navigation points, point A to point B to point C to point D to point E. Many navigation systems use what's called inertial navigation. Well, when you start inertial navigation, what happens is that you have an inertial sensor and a clock. And so the clock runs for some amount of time to get you from point A to point B to point C to point D in an inertial track. So for a cruise missile, for instance, this controls its targeting. Let's talk about something like the United States Tomahawk. The United States Tomahawk system does not work without my infrastructure. And Raytheon Corporation, Wes, their CEO, and another gentleman by the name of Hugo Tufel, who is an ex-military judge advocate, are very, very aware of it. They understand the technology. They understand that the Tomahawk itself cannot fly without Todd Glassey's IP. It gets a lot worse when you start talking about Patriot systems, because Patriots are anti-missile missiles. So they have to actually lock on an object, create a motion index location control for it, and then measure the distance between where they are now, based on an inertial control, and that object. Oh my God.
Glassey took his case to the International Criminal Court and to local courts in the United States. But can he legally outweigh global companies and governments and correct the path that seems to be out of control?
There is a war crimes complaint physically with the International Crime Court. The complaint number is 336/18. They asked me to refile it and to provide them with a document of detail with regard to each of the sections of Section 8, sub 2, sub B. Generally, we use 8 sub 2 sub B sub IV, but there are a lot of others as well. Because the software and the system is used in weapons that are actually used to commit genocide, there's also a war crime in the ICC Rome Statute, Section 6 and Section 7, 6A and 7A, both. So it's everywhere inside of weapon systems. We've been in court for well over a decade. We first took the company Microsemi, who is Datum's successor, to court, and literally we drove them into liquidation. This crime happened. It's airtight. Datum went out and filed a patent in 7 different jurisdictions illegally with no authorization and abandoned it. It's crime, period. So Datum was forced into liquidation, as was its successor, a company called Symmetricom. We sued Apple. We didn't sue Facebook directly. We sued them indirectly as a doe. We sued Microsoft, Google, Netflix, PayPal, eBay, the two key networking companies, because they're both tied to Stanford University. That would be Cisco Corporation, which is a spin out of Stanford. I'm concerned I'm going to get killed. I'm concerned that there are a lot of things happening in the world that need to be disclosed. I'm concerned that the United States has been destroyed by people who have taken my intellectual property, in particular, a lot of Silicon Valley companies, and they have illegally offshored it. They have taken all of the profits that they have made from it. We're talking about trillions of dollars in profits.
If Todd Glassey's case is real, and the International Criminal Court adopted his documents and eventually he won the case, how could Glassey help humanity, especially that the invention has been used in potential crimes?
I'm going to rebuild Syria. I'm going to spend the money that the US people rightfully owe the people of Syria for all the damage they've done. I'm going to do what the First Lady of Syria has been asking people to do, and that is step up and write a check. I'm going to do it in big ways.